Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another edition of KlimaHistory. Did you miss me? Huh? Yeah? Sure you did. It's been a while, been a couple weeks since my last video. But today we're going to talk about the French and Indian War, so kick back. Go grab some of that delicious popcorn butter. Delicious butter. And join us on another fun-filled adventure with KlimaHistory. Alright, so let's get into the background of the war. How did this war begin? When did it start? Now, the war started in 1754 to 1763. It was also known as the 7 Years' War. What Mr. Klima, that's 9 years. It's not 7. Yes, you're right. The war ended in 1761, but it takes a couple years for those Europeans to kind of make that treaty and kind of, stop a war. Remember, information travels very, very, very slow at this time. So it was known as the 7 Years' War. This was a worldwide conflict between the British and French. It was called the French and Indian War by the British because that's who they were fighting. They were fighting the French and the natives, the Indians as they called them. And it wasn't a conflict between just the French and Indians. The Indians mostly sided with the French during this war. So let's look at the land that was claimed by both sides. Where were the French? Where were the British during or before this war? Now we know the British are on the East Coast, the 13 colonies. Yes, I remember those. New England, Middle, and Southern. You keep stressing that to me, Mr. Klima. I know. Okay. The French were out there in the West and up there in Canada as well. Now, if you check out this map here, this area in orange was known as New France. Now, they didn't colonize like the British did. They were more interested in trading for furs and other things with the natives, unlike the British, who were more interested in claiming the land for what we call mercantilism, for natural resources for the mother country. So it was a little different. How did this war start? How did the events, or what were the events that caused this war? Now, you kind of mentioned this in class the other day, but fur was the #1 reason for this war. The fur trade was very important for France, and Britain started realizing the benefits and profit that could be made by selling furs over in Europe. And furs were very important in Europe because it would keep you warm, keep you dry, and there was nothing else like it in Europe. So you take some furs back to Europe, you make a ton of money, and the British wanted a part of that as well. So you start to see the British moving more and more west into French territory. Isn't this man right here a stud? Look at that hat. Oh yes, I would wear one of those. Anyhow, both the French and English claimed land, mostly in what we call the Ohio River Valley. That's the area of land that's where the Ohio River is. And if you take a look at this map here, it stretches all the way from western Pennsylvania all the way to Illinois. So if you look at the number of rivers here, lots of tributaries, lots of rivers for those amazing beaver furs. Now, both the English and the French claimed that land and settled it, and the French kind of realized that, hey, these guys are coming closer and closer. We got to do something about this. And both sides are saying, all mine, all mine. So, the natives are kind of caught in the middle here. Who do they side with? And most of the natives, especially the Iroquois Confederacy at this time, side with the French. Mostly because they were trade partners for such a long time, and also because the French were much nicer. They realized the French weren't trying to take their land, they were just trying to trade with them. The British, however, were trying to take their land, and so that's why most of the natives sided with the French. So, what happens? Well, this young man, early 20s, named George Washington, is sent by the governor of Virginia, Dinwiddie, to tell the French to leave. Whoa. Oh my goodness. What will happen? I don't know what will happen. Did Washington start the war? Maybe. Some people agree, most historians agree, that Washington played a considerable role in this. Or was it just happenstance? Who knows? But one of the first battles early on that really started this war was the Battle of Jumonville Glen. Now, the Battle of Jumonville Glen happened in May 1754 in the area that is what is today Pittsburgh. It was called Uniontown back then. It's in western Pennsylvania, almost on the border of West Virginia, what is West Virginia today. So, like I said earlier, Washington was sent by Governor Dinwiddie to protect British interests in the area of western Pennsylvania. Now, what Washington was doing was overseeing the construction of a fort there in the area. Well, the French kind of caught on to this, and they sent a pretty considerable force to the area under the command of Joseph Coulon de Jumonville. I don't know French, so I don't know if that's pronounced correctly or not. But anyways, and his orders was to tell Washington and others to stay out of French territory. Washington is alerted by some Native American allies that Jumonville was coming, and so basically they set up an ambush and kill most of them, including Jumonville. But there's a little debate or controversy in this. Some say that Jumonville was actually captured as a prisoner of war. And when Jumonville was captured, and by the way, here's a map, a primary source of Washington's notes during this time period when he was ordered to oversee this fort. And if you look real closely at it, if you ever pull up this primary source, you can check it out. So, what happened here? Now, Britain and France were not at war, but when this happened, it was a big deal. Because when Jumonville was killed, the French were outraged at this. So they made up a story, really, that this Indian ally had grabbed a tomahawk in revenge against Jumonville, and the French had put a tomahawk in his head. Well, really, that didn't happen. Jumonville was killed in battle, and basically Washington was blamed for this. And when Washington goes back to Fort Necessity, he is surrounded by the French. They sent a large French force to Fort Necessity, and Washington is surrounded, and he surrenders, basically. Now, in the surrender statement, Washington admits to assassinating Jumonville, putting a tomahawk in his head. Well, Washington didn't read French, so he didn't know what he was writing. It was just translated into French, and it made it seem like he admitted to the assassination. Well, the French used this as kind of a way to start a war with the British and to get the British out of their territory. Now, the British are not happy with Washington. He's almost decommissioned for this act. But the colonists look at Washington as a hero. Like, God, this guy is great. We can't do this to him. And so, let's talk about Britain. Long story short, the British beat the French and become the #1 superpower in the world. And as a result, in the Treaty of Paris of 1763, the British get all the land up to the Mississippi River, including Canada. That's why the Canadians are from British ancestry. If you look at the map here, this is before 1754. After 1763, the whole area in pink now belongs to the British. Because of this war, there's a significant amount of debt, and we're going to talk about this in more depth in class, but the colonists are forced to pay for half of the war debt from the French and Indian War because it was the colonists' fault, apparently. The British also wanted to continue trade with the natives, but they didn't want the colonists fighting with the natives out there. So they passed a law called the Proclamation of 1763. And in this law, basically, colonists are not allowed to move west of the Appalachian Mountains, which is going to cause more problems. Now, if you look here, if you know who Chief Pontiac is the automobile maker. In the early 1920s, 30s, 40s, the automobile maker Pontiac used this Native American head symbol on their hoods of their cars to kind of honor Chief Pontiac. Just a cool little factoid. Benjamin Franklin also during this time tried to unite the colonies to fight the French and Indians. Kind of wanted a united front, but no one would listen to him. And they'll find out soon enough that Benjamin Franklin, that old guy, actually had a really good idea. And we'll talk about this more, Join or Die, this famous little piece of art that's going to be used during colonial times. Or rather, during, or right before the American Revolution. So that's it on the French and Indian War. I hope you guys enjoyed some of the little factoids in here. And I'll see you next time for another edition of KlimaHistory.